to do is try to use a lasso, and this kind of overlaps with the content that we'll cover with the far leg. But if I can turn my partner's hips, so let's say we move you here. If Lynn's hips are pointing towards me and I'm on my knees, he lassos, it's so easy. But the moment I actually can start looking to turn his hips away, right, I'm using a knee drop in almost like a sprawling position. When Lynn tries to throw in the lasso, even if he gets his foot in front of me, I'm not really concerned, right? So notice this posture that I'm taking where I'm not just staying in front of the knee, but especially when I want to try to turn my partner's hips, what I'm looking to do is kind of shift my chest to the outside of Lynn's knee. And from here, I'm going to utilize a sprawling action. Or notice how I'm basically committing my hips here and connecting our hips. So now when Lynn tries to really try face me and such, it's difficult. Not saying it's impossible, and when Lynn does try to frame me, this is when we're going to transition from a convex position to a concave position. And now he tries to frame, and this is when we're really going to be able to break through. And we feel like, wow, I feel like he's recovering his legs. I feel like this is difficult. Then I can go back and use the sprawl. So it's kind of demonstrating this idea of leading edge a little, where I feel like from here, he's framing my upper body. I can use my hips. If I feel like he's making it so that it's hard for my hips to break through, he reverse frames me, frames my hips away. Now my upper body comes through. But I really like, honestly, as of late, this has become one of my favorite variations of the cap, because this does make up for some of the issues one may encounter whilst trying to do these flank positions, where sometimes it's slippery, especially when the mats are slippery. Staying on your feet can be difficult, right? You try to drive in, you slide. Whereas when you stay on your knee, you're actually just laying on your partner. And then when you try and maneuver yourself past, it's like less driving in, more just sprawling your weight through. So now when he tries to frame and square up to me, it's actually so much more difficult. And then this really sets up a lot of other opportunities for us to continue either progressing with upper body position and so on and so on. So these are kind of the three main ways that I like to control the near side leg, knee drop being probably my favorite, but ultimately you're going to have to use them all in conjunction with one another, because the idea is the deficiencies of one are kind of made up by the other. And I kind of like this idea. I believe Danaher talked about it in his dynamic pinning and half guard passing DVD, where there's no perfect pin, but there's perfect pinning. So it's like all about this transition between all these different positions that make up for the deficiency of the other. So, yeah. All right, so we discussed previously how we can start looking to retain the pommels of the near side leg. Now let's talk about the far side leg. So we'll split this up into two parts, where from here, in regards to the far leg, we discussed one of the options previously in regards to turning the hips, which we'll go into a little bit more depth on in a moment. But broadly speaking, the kind of guideline that I use to make it so that my partner cannot pummel this near side, the far side leg in, is by occupying the inside of your partner's knee. And this isn't just like, okay, I'm going to be on the inside of his thigh. It's going to be literally on the inside of his knee. How am I going to occupy this space? It's not going to be through one part of my body. It can be through I can kind of cycle between positions, where it can initially be my head, can be my elbow, can be my shoulder, can even be my hand, whether it be cross hand, same side hand. So now when he tries to pummel this leg in, it's actually very difficult. Whether I'm here, I like to use my head a lot. And from here, even if Lynn tries to lasso, right, from here it's difficult. However, we have to take into consideration, what if Lynn starts bringing his knee below the line of his hip, right, from here? From here, it would be meaningful, like, why would I follow him from here? Because now there's no longer the threat of a high leg or knee shield, etc. Because if he's here and he's trying to bring his knee up, yes, and I can occupy this space. However, the moment this knee comes down to try maybe pummel in, all I need to do is make sure I don't leave this space open between my elbow and my rib, but I actually don't need to occupy the inside of his knee anymore, because now when he tries to pummel in, I just keep this, he tries to pummel. It's difficult. Once his knee comes above the line of his hips, that's when I start focusing on that once again. Just using my head, shoulder, elbow, hand, etc. And then eventually I'm going to start looking to move towards his upper body. So this is broadly speaking how I look to initially prevent my partner from pummeling this far side leg in. Later we'll address like reactions where they get a lasso, what we can do from there. But for now, this is the rough heuristic that I like to follow. And then once again, we're going to do both of these at the same time, where we're controlling the near side leg and the far side leg. So once we're able to do these like pretty comfortably and consistently over time, this is when passes are going to become very easy. All right, so next we're going to be talking about an alternative way that we can start looking to prevent the far leg from pummeling in. So right now we're just talking in regards to legs. In a moment we are going to talk about ways to make it difficult, but more in regards to the upper body. But for now, we're talking about our lower body. We discussed this earlier in regards to turning our partner's hips, but understand that any way we can actually turn our partner's hips is going to make it, well, turn their hips to either have their hips facing the ceiling or even better, turn facing away from you, is going to make it very difficult for them to pummel the lasso. So whether we use means like, let's say I'm on my knee here, I can hip forward and now like we'll move a little bit away from the camera. But now when Lynn tries to pummel in his lasso, it's very difficult. Like if he tries to pummel in a knee shield, it just doesn't really work from here. Not only can we do this from a kneeling position, we can also do this from standing, which is a little bit difficult. But from here, it's almost like we're trying to circle towards this kind of smash pass position. Or even if our leg is in between our partner's legs, we can kind of circle in for this leg drag. So understanding that any effect we can have on our partner's hips to move them away, and often, especially when their knee is closer to the mat, and I feel like there's a real need I feel like I can't really occupy the space here, even if he gets a lasso, right? I can push this into place where I get his knee just slightly above the mat, and from here, I can get my chest to the outside. Now I can kind of sprawl, and because in no gi, the robustness of his lasso is nothing like in the gi, we can easily pummel our own hand out. So this is a kind of basically a good summary of most of the preventative measures that I use to stop my partner's lasso from coming in, and then we'll talk about more corrective measures later. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about in regards to the near side leg is actually the position of my foot or knee relative to my partner's waist. So understand that generally, what do we want? I'll explain what we want and then why. Where I want my foot/knee by my partner's like hip bone. I don't want it to be like below by his butt, because from here, by playing with the foot in this position, it's hard for him to especially use this far leg. And this is kind of a mix between the far leg and near leg, but it makes it very difficult for him to interfere with my ability to maintain this position. Versus, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, if I'm trying to do this, like I'm here and I place my foot just basically in line with the center line, it makes it very easy for him to then like insert a butterfly hook and then use this as a means to regard or go into his attacks. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like then if you move your head here, right? If I'm here, like it's very plausible that my foot just comes down, whether I'm camping like this, etc. Or it's just slightly below the line of his hips, where now he's able to insert his foot. We'll talk about ways we can address this in the future, but generally I want you guys to follow this guide of having your foot in line with your partner's hip as opposed to below their hip. And now even as he moves, right, he try hip escapes, whatever, I still drop my knee below. Because if I just go here, he inserts a butterfly hook. Now he's going to have a means to off-balance me, and then he can possibly enter his own attacks. So just something to be wary of, and something to really try work towards, and something to avoid. All right, so we just discussed what we can do to inhibit our partner's ability to perform guard retention movements on the far side leg and the near side leg. However, we can also use some degree of upper body position to limit our partner's ability to do so. So we did talk about, we'll start with the most basic upper body configuration, which is a hip and knee post, where, I mean, this is classic like Toreando grips that you generally like to use. And something I would be cautious of is, especially when people think of Toreando, they tend to flare this elbow out and like go for this movement. This isn't wrong, but our goal once again isn't to pass immediately, but it's actually to maintain an advantageous passing position over time. And doing this is not necessarily conducive to our goals of maintaining this. We can do it momentarily to threaten a pass. However, if we just hold this, we do incur risk in regards to choi bars, kimuras, etc. So what I prefer to do is I play with my hand in line with my hip, and then I play with basically my hand on my partner's far rib. So I don't want it to just be on the hip bone, because I feel like it makes it difficult for me to put weight onto my